accepted a ride from someone she worked with every day. It was a normal favor, a short drive. She sent one last message from the passenger seat. 14 minutes later, her phone went silent. No calls, no location, nothing after that. How does someone disappear in the middle of an ordinary workday? She was the kind of person people trusted without thinking about it. Not because she demanded attention or tried to stand out, but because she was steady, reliable. The type who showed up on time, remembered small details, and stayed late when someone else needed help. At work, she blended into the rhythm of the place. Familiar face, familiar smile. Nothing about her ever felt risky. Her days followed a pattern. Morning coffee from the same gas station. A quick scroll through her phone before clocking in. Casual conversations that stayed surface level but friendly. She didn't overshare. She didn't pry. She just existed in a way that made people comfortable. Safe. The job itself wasn't special. A standard workplace, shared schedules, shared frustrations. People leaned on each other to get through the hours. Rides were offered when cars broke down. Lunches were shared when paychecks ran thin. Favors passed back and forth without anyone keeping score. It was the kind of environment where trust didn't feel like a choice. It felt built in. That trust extended to one coworker in particular. Someone she saw almost every shift. Someone who joked about the same things, complained about the same management decisions, and knew the layout of her day without ever asking. They weren't close friends. They didn't hang out outside of work. But there was familiarity, and familiarity has a way of lowering defenses. On that day, nothing stood out at first. She arrived like she always did. Same clothes she'd worn before. Same bag slung over her shoulder. She checked in with a few people, exchanged quick words, and settled into the routine. If there was any hesitation in her body language, it didn't register to anyone watching. At some point, the ride came up. Maybe it was convenience. Maybe her car was unavailable. Maybe it was just easier than waiting. The offer didn't feel loaded. It wasn't dramatic, just a simple solution to a small problem. She didn't hesitate long enough for anyone to remember it later. Security cameras caught fragments of the day. Hallways, doorways, people passing each other without stopping. Her movements were ordinary, unremarkable, the kind of footage no one ever looks at twice unless they have a reason to. She walked out with her coworker in full view of the camera. No struggle, no tension, no visible fear. Just two people leaving work together like they had done before. The parking lot looked the same as it always did. Cars coming and going. Sunlight reflecting off windshields. Nothing about the moment suggested it would matter later. Before getting into the vehicle, she sent a message. Short, casual, the kind of text you send without thinking. It wasn't a goodbye. It wasn't a warning. Just a normal update in the middle of a normal day. The car pulled away. The camera kept recording. Other people came and went. Time moved forward without pause. No one knew yet that this was the last ordinary moment. And no one realized how much weight that quiet trust was about to carry. The coworker wasn't new. That mattered. He wasn't a stranger pulled from a random moment. And he wasn't someone who drifted in and out of her life. He was part of the background of her workdays, someone whose presence had become so normal it barely registered anymore. That kind of familiarity doesn't announce itself. It settles in quietly. They worked overlapping shifts, not always side by side, but close enough to exchange words throughout the day. Small talk filled the gaps. Complaints about long hours. Jokes about customers. Comments about how tired everyone looked by the end of the week. Nothing personal enough to raise eyebrows. Nothing cold enough to suggest distance. Over time, he learned her routines without ever asking directly. What time she usually arrived. When she took her breaks. Which days she stayed late. It wasn't information she guarded. It was information anyone paying attention could notice. She didn't see it as being watched. She saw it as being known. She had accepted rides from coworkers before. It wasn't unusual. Gas was expensive. Schedules changed last minute. People helped each other out. The ride that day didn't feel like a favor that needed careful thought. It felt like something that fit naturally into the way her workplace functioned. She trusted the environment more than the individual. That was the subtle difference. The job had never given her a reason to feel unsafe. The people there had never crossed lines. When someone offered help, it came wrapped in normalcy. And normalcy has a way of dulling instincts. Earlier that week, nothing in her behavior suggested concern. She laughed. She made plans for later. She talked about things she needed to do after work. She didn't hint at fear or discomfort. If anything, she seemed grounded, present, fully inside her life. Security footage from previous days showed the same pattern. Her entering, her leaving, brief interactions with coworkers in shared spaces. The coworker in question appeared in those frames too, never lingering, never standing too close. Just another person moving through the same routine. People who saw them together didn't read meaning into it. There was no visible tension, no arguments, no awkward pauses. They looked like coworkers doing what coworkers do. And that's the danger of ordinary scenes. They teach everyone around them not to question what they're seeing. The ride itself was discussed casually. No raised voices, no private corners, no sense of urgency. It happened in the open, where anyone could have overheard. She didn't pull someone aside to mention it. She didn't send a message asking for backup. She simply went. Her phone activity earlier that day reflected the same calm. Messages about errands. A reminder she'd set for later. Nothing rushed. Nothing that suggested she felt pressed for time or unsure of her surroundings. From the outside, it looked like trust doing what trust usually does. Smoothing the edges of the day. Making life easier. Helping things move along. But trust doesn't announce when it's misplaced. It only reveals itself when it's already too late. The first sign that something was wrong wasn't dramatic. There was no alarm, no sudden realization. It began as a quiet delay that felt easy to explain away. A message that didn't get answered. A call that went straight to voicemail. Things that happen every day without meaning anything at all. At first, the silence made sense. She was probably busy. Maybe the ride took longer than expected. Maybe she decided to run an errand before heading home. She was an adult with her own schedule. No one expected constant updates from her. But time kept moving. The phone stayed quiet longer than usual. The kind of quiet that doesn't sit right once you notice it. Someone checked her last message again, rereading it for clues that hadn't seemed important before. It still sounded normal, casual, calm. Her location didn't update. Not because it was turned off, but because it stopped, frozen in place, as if time had paused around it. At first, that felt like a technical glitch. Phones do that sometimes. Signals drop, batteries die, but hers shouldn't have. She was careful about charging it. She relied on it for work, for directions, for staying connected. A dead phone didn't match her habits. It didn't match her patterns. The coworker who had offered the ride didn't reach out. Not immediately, not later. That absence felt small at first. Maybe he assumed she'd made it home. Maybe he didn't think it was his place to check in. People often avoid follow-ups that might feel awkward. Still, the silence stacked up. Hours passed. Plans she'd mentioned earlier went untouched. Messages sent to her stayed unread. The normal digital signs of her day simply stopped. No scrolling, no reactions, no movement. Someone tried calling again, then again. Each attempt ended the same way. Voicemail, empty, unchanged. By the time concern started to settle in, it did so unevenly. One person felt it first, then another. Quiet conversations started happening. Have you heard from her? Did she say where she was going? The answers didn't line up cleanly, because no one had thought to memorize details that morning. The security cameras became a point of reference, without anyone saying it out loud. People replayed the image of her walking out, the angle of her body, the way she moved. Everything looked fine, too fine. That's what made the silence heavier. If something bad had happened right away, there would be signs. A missed call. A message half sent. A sudden change. But there was nothing. Just a clean break, like a cord being cut without fraying. The longer it went on, the harder it became to dismiss. Silence turned into absence. Absence turned into fear. And somewhere in the middle of that realization was a question no one wanted to say yet. What if the last person to see her wasn't just a witness? The moment crossed a line quietly. There was no announcement, no single second that felt like the end. Instead, it arrived when excuses stopped working, when maybe later stretched too thin, when the normal explanations began to feel like lies people were telling themselves to stay calm. Someone finally tried reaching the coworker who had given her the ride. The message was simple, neutral, just a question. Did you drop her off? Did everything go okay? The reply didn't come right away. That delay carried weight, not because it proved anything, but because it shifted the atmosphere. Until then, concern had lived in the background. Now it moved forward into the center of the room. The possibility that something had gone wrong stopped being abstract. When he did respond, the answer was brief. He said he dropped her off. He said it was quick. He said nothing unusual happened. The words were ordinary, but they didn't settle the tension. They raised new questions instead. Where exactly had he dropped her off? Why hadn't she messaged anyone after? Why did her phone stop where it did? Those questions stayed unspoken at first. No one wanted to accuse. No one wanted to jump ahead. Trust doesn't evaporate instantly. It cracks slowly under the weight of things that don't add up. The security footage was reviewed again, this time with intent. Her last clear image became a reference point. The exact time she left, the exact angle of the car, how long it took before it disappeared from view. Every detail suddenly felt important. The timestamp mattered now. 14 minutes. That was the window between her last message and the moment her phone went silent. Not hours, not days. 14 minutes that no one could account for with certainty. That span of time felt too small to explain everything. And yet it was all they had. People began to realize how little they truly knew about that ride. No one could say what route was taken. No one could say if there had been a stop. No one could say if anyone else was present. The simplicity of the favor worked against them now. There had been no reason to pay attention. Her personal belongings became another concern. She hadn't shown up where she was expected. She hadn't accessed her accounts. Everything she needed to function was silent with her. The coworker's story stayed the same, but the lack of detail lingered. It wasn't wrong enough to challenge outright. It was just thin, like something missing from the middle. That's when the fear shifted into something sharper. This wasn't just a delay anymore. It was a point of no return. By the time the word missing was said out loud, it didn't feel sudden. It felt overdue. The silence had stretched past every reasonable explanation, and now it pressed in from all sides. Her phone had been quiet for too long. Not a single call answered. Not a single message opened. No movement. No signal. This was the moment when absence stopped being theoretical. People began retracing her day in fragments. Who saw her last? What she said? What she wore? Ordinary details were suddenly precious because they were all that remained. Her routine, once invisible, became a trail everyone wished they had paid closer attention to. Her phone was the most unsettling part. It wasn't just turned off. It hadn't pinged. It hadn't traveled. It simply stopped, as if it had been set down somewhere and left behind. That stillness felt intentional, even if no one could explain why. Messages kept coming in, some cautious, some panicked, all unanswered. When calls were made from different numbers, the result didn't change. Straight to voicemail, the same greeting, the same empty silence afterward. Each attempt confirmed what people already feared but didn't want to accept. She didn't miss obligations lightly. She didn't disappear without telling someone. That wasn't who she was. The version of her that people knew didn't match what was happening now. The coworker was contacted again. This time, the questions were more specific. Where exactly did you drop her off? What time? Did she say anything before she left the car? The answers didn't grow clearer. The location was vague. The timing approximate. He insisted nothing seemed wrong, that she got out on her own, that she walked away. But no one could find proof of that walk. No cameras showed her arriving anywhere. No neighbors reported seeing her. No stores recorded her entering. The world she was supposed to move through after that ride showed no sign of her at all. Her personal items added to the unease. Things she never left without were unaccounted for. Things that tied her to her life, her plans, her future. The gap between the last CCTV image and the silence of her phone became unbearable to sit with. 14 minutes had erased her from the day. 14 minutes that refused to explain themselves. People began to realize how completely she had vanished. Not slowly, not gradually, but all at once. One moment present, the next gone. This wasn't a case of someone choosing not to be found. There was no trail of intention, no goodbye, no preparation, just an abrupt ending to an ordinary afternoon. And as night came, the fear deepened into something colder. Because silence like this doesn't stay empty forever. The hours after she was reported missing felt distorted. Time moved, but nothing progressed. People waited for updates that didn't come, staring at their phones as if willing them to ring. Every vibration sparked hope. Every missed call brought it down again. Her family learned in pieces. A message. A phone call that didn't explain everything at once. Confusion came first, then disbelief. She wouldn't just disappear. There had to be a mistake, a misunderstanding, something that would be cleared up with one return call. But the call never came. Her absence settled into her home quickly. Shoes where she left them. Lights she never turned off. Small signs of interruption that made it clear she hadn't planned to be gone. These weren't the details of someone starting over. They were the details of someone interrupted. Friends compared notes, realizing how little they actually knew about the ride. Everyone had assumed someone else asked more questions. Everyone had trusted the same simple explanation. That trust now felt heavy. The coworker remained on the edge of the conversation, present but distant. His answers didn't change, but his tone did. Shorter, less open, not defensive exactly, just careful. That shift didn't go unnoticed. Her digital footprint remained frozen. No banking activity, no social media movement, no sign of life. The version of her that existed online had stopped mid-sentence, midday, without warning. Concern spread beyond her immediate circle. People who barely knew her started asking questions. They recognized the routine she'd vanished from. The idea that someone like her could simply drop out of it unsettled them. The search for her focused on what little certainty remained. The time she left work, the 14-minute window, the coworker's account. Everything else was speculation. That narrow focus created pressure. Details that hadn't mattered before were examined closely. The route he claimed to have taken, the reason for choosing it, the lack of stops. Each explanation stood alone, but together they felt thin. People began to notice inconsistencies. Small ones, the kind that could be explained individually, but not all at once. A time estimate that didn't match traffic. A location description that fell off. A memory that seemed rehearsed rather than recalled. Still, no one said the quiet thought out loud yet. No one wanted to believe that trust itself could be the reason she was gone. Her family clung to the hope that she was somewhere waiting to be found. That her silence had a reason that didn't involve harm. But hope started to change shape. It became more fragile, more cautious. As the days passed, the weight of not knowing settled into every conversation. Every moment was suspended between fear and denial. And beneath all of it was a growing awareness. The story they'd been told might not be the story that ended her day. As attention narrowed, the questions became harder to avoid. The coworker's version of events was no longer just part of the story. It was the center of it. Every timeline, every possibility, bent back toward those 14 minutes. He was asked to repeat what happened. More than once. The words stayed mostly the same, but the delivery changed. Certain details came faster. Others took longer to surface. Small pauses appeared where confidence had once been. He said he dropped her off and watched her walk away. But when pressed, he couldn't describe which direction she went. He couldn't say what she was wearing beyond general colors. He couldn't recall if she used her phone before stepping out of the car. Those gaps didn't prove anything, but they made people uneasy. The route he claimed to take was mapped out against the time window. It fit loosely, but only if everything went perfectly. No traffic, no stops, no hesitation. That kind of precision felt unlikely during a normal afternoon. Security footage from surrounding areas was checked. Cameras from stores, intersections, parking lots. Her image never appeared. The absence became a presence of its own. The more footage reviewed, the louder that absence felt. Attention turned to the coworker's movements after the ride. Where he went, how long it took, what his phone showed. There were stretches of time that didn't line up cleanly. Short gaps. Moments unaccounted for. Again, none of it stood alone as proof. But together, it formed a pattern that refused to settle. People who knew him started re-evaluating their own interactions. Moments that had once felt neutral now felt sharp. Comments that seemed harmless at the time replayed with different meaning. Trust shifted into doubt without ever fully announcing itself. Her family listened to everything carefully. Every new detail felt like a step closer and a step further away at the same time. Answers brought more questions. Clarifications created new contradictions. The idea that she might have trusted the wrong person settled heavily. It wasn't just about what happened to her. It was about how easily it could have happened. A normal favor, a short ride, a decision made without fear. Pressure mounted quietly, the kind that doesn't come from shouting or accusations, but from repetition, from asking the same questions and getting answers that never quite fit together the same way twice. The coworker became isolated by the weight of suspicion, even without anyone openly naming it. Conversations stopped flowing around him. Looks lingered a second too long. Silence followed his words. And still she was gone. Every lead circled back. Every theory collapsed into the same narrow space of time. 14 minutes that held everything and explained nothing. The truth felt close enough to touch, yet just out of reach. And the longer it stayed that way, the more dangerous it felt. In the end, there was no moment of closure that arrived cleanly. No single answer that settled everything. What remained was a truth shaped by absence, by the quiet understanding that whatever happened in those 14 minutes could never be undone. Her life was reconstructed through what she left behind. The way she helped without being asked. The way she trusted easily, not because she was careless, but because kindness had always been met with kindness before. That trust became the most painful detail of all. The coworker faded from view, but the questions around him did not. His role in her last known moments stayed fixed, unmoving. The ride he offered became a symbol of how quickly ordinary decisions can turn irreversible. A favor that asked for nothing until it took everything. CCTV footage of her final moments continued to exist, looping silently. Her walking, her getting into the car, her unaware of how final that choice would be. The footage never showed fear. That absence of fear made it harder to watch, not easier. Her family learned to live with unanswered questions. They marked time differently now, before and after. The day she left for work, the day she didn't come home. Every milestone carried her absence alongside it. Friends replayed conversations, searching for meaning that wasn't there. They wondered if they could have said something, asked something, noticed something. But hindsight offered no comfort, only reminders. What lingered most was how unremarkable the beginning had been. No warning, no red flags, just a routine day and a trusted ride. The kind of moment that happens thousands of times without consequence, until once it doesn't. Her story didn't end loudly. It faded into silence. A phone that never rang again. A location that never moved. A presence that vanished without explanation. That silence became the lasting truth, not just of what happened to her, but of how easily safety can be assumed, how trust can be extended without fear, how quickly the ordinary can slip into something permanent. She didn't do anything wrong. She didn't take a risk she could see. She accepted help from someone she believed she knew. And that belief is what makes her story stay with people. Because it could have been anyone, any workplace, any ordinary day. The CCTV keeps recording, but the answers never arrive.